Welcome back. I'm Dean, and this is the night my life split in two. I'm 45 years old, and until all of this happened, I thought I had built a decent life. Not a perfect one, just a solid one. I work as a plant shift supervisor at a steel processing facility in Youngstown, Ohio. I started on the floor years ago, welding, cutting, hauling steel, doing the kind of work that leaves your shoulders aching and your hands rough no matter how much lotion you use. Nobody handed me a thing. I earned everything the hard way. I've been married to Delaney since I was 24 and she was 21. We have one son, Landon, who had just turned 14 when this all came apart. For most of our marriage, I believed we were one of those couples that could take a hit and keep going. We argued sometimes, sure. We had stretches where life felt heavy. Bills, work, school, the usual pressure that comes with raising a family. But I thought we were steady. I really did. Then there was Reed. Reed Keegan was not just some casual acquaintance. He was my son's godfather. He stood beside me at Landon's christening. He came to Thanksgiving dinners. He helped me build the deck in our backyard. He was the guy I called when Landon had a seizure and I needed someone to follow the ambulance because my hands were shaking too badly to drive straight. I trusted him. I genuinely trusted him. And then there was Glenn, one of my closest friends from work. We had known each other for years. Same shifts, same break room, same long days and longer nights. He had been in my kitchen, drinking coffee, laughing with my family, acting like everything in my life was exactly what it seemed. That was the world before that Saturday in October. A wife I loved, a son I would do anything for, and a circle of people I believed had my back. I had no idea how much of that was already gone. Delaney told me she was going to Amber's birthday party. Just a small girls' night, she said. A few women from her gym, some neighbors, nothing big. She left around 6 in a black dress I had never seen before, wearing heels that looked brand new and enough perfume to fill the whole hallway. I remember standing in the doorway and thinking she looked beautiful. I also remember noticing she had not dressed like that for me in a long time. I pushed that thought away like I always did. That was our pattern. If something felt off, I told myself I was tired, or busy, or reading too much into it. I had spent years learning how to keep my head down and keep moving. At the plant, that mindset kept people safe. At home, it kept me blind. Landon was in his room when she left, headphones on, probably gaming or listening to music. He was at that age where he still wanted to be close, but not too close. He would talk to me about basketball, school, and whatever random thing had caught his attention that week. He was a good kid, smart, observant, quiet in a way that made you pay attention when he finally spoke. After Delaney left, the house got very still. I made myself some coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and looked over a few work notes for the next morning. It was the kind of ordinary evening that feels forgettable while you are living it. That is what makes it dangerous. Nothing dramatic happens. Nothing warns you. You just keep sitting there believing your life is intact. And honestly, I thought everything was fine. I really did. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. Delaney had been different for a while, not in one obvious way, in little ways. She guarded her phone more carefully. She started taking longer errands. She got dressed up for things that used to be simple. She laughed at messages on her screen and turned it away when I walked in. If I asked where she was going, she answered quickly, almost too quickly, like she had rehearsed it. But at the time, I had no idea. We had been through hard years before. When Landon was little, money was tight. I worked overtime whenever I could. Delaney handled most of the home stuff then, and I told myself that was just how families worked. Later, when I got promoted, I thought things would settle down. Instead, life just got busier. I was proud of the fact that I could provide. I thought that was enough. I thought being dependable was the same thing as being present. Delaney and I had built our marriage on routine. Same grocery store, same church holidays, same family dinners, same jokes we had told so many times they had become part of the furniture. Reed fit into that routine so naturally that I never questioned it. He was always around, always helpful, always smiling. He was the kind of man people described as reliable, and I believed them. Glenn was the same way. He and I had worked together long enough to know each other's habits. He knew when I was running on too little sleep. I knew when he was lying about fishing trips because he hated fishing. We had that easy kind of friendship that feels permanent because it has lasted so long. That is why the first warning signs did not register as warnings. They felt like background noise. Delaney started mentioning Amber more often. Amber's birthday, Amber's gym group, Amber's neighbors. She said the women were planning a surprise party for her. She said it was going to be small. She said not to wait up if I was tired because it might run late. I remember nodding and telling her to have fun. I even meant it. Then there were the little things with Reed. He started coming by more often without a clear reason. He helped with the deck. He brought over a tool I supposedly needed. He stayed after dinner longer than necessary. He would stand in the kitchen talking to Delaney while I was cleaning up, and I told myself that was just friendship. The kind of friendship that develops when people have known each other a long time. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. There was one evening in late summer when Reed stayed after everyone else had left. Landon had gone to his room, and I was outside checking the grill. When I came back in, Delaney and Reed were standing too close in the hallway, not touching, not obviously, just close enough that both of them moved apart too quickly when they saw me. Delaney said something about asking Reed where he had bought a new set of tires. Reed laughed a little too hard. I remember feeling a small knot in my stomach, but I let it go. That detail matters, remember it, because that was the first time I felt something was off, and I ignored it. Glenn was the other part of it. He had been around our house for years. He knew our routines. He knew when I was working late. He knew when Delaney was home alone. He also knew how much I trusted him. That is what makes betrayal so ugly. It does not always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from people who know exactly where to stand to do the most damage. A few weeks before the party, Glenn asked me if I was still planning to take Landon to the fall game at the high school. He said it like a normal question, but there was something in his tone that I could not place at the time. I remember answering him and then watching him look away like he had almost said something else. But I did not push. I was too busy, too tired, too sure that if something mattered, someone would tell me. But at the time, I had no idea. Delaney and I had also been drifting in the quiet way that married people sometimes do when they stop talking about the important things. Not fighting, not separating, just slowly becoming strangers in the same house. She would sit on the couch scrolling through her phone while I watched the news. I would come home exhausted and find dinner already done, the dishes put away, and no real conversation waiting for me. I told myself that was normal, that this was what long marriages looked like. I should have asked more questions. I should have paid attention to the way she stopped meeting my eyes when I asked about her day. I should have noticed that Reed's name came up too often and too casually. I should have listened to the part of me that felt uneasy when Glenn went quiet around certain topics. Instead, I kept going. Then came that Saturday night. Around 8:30, my phone buzzed with a text from Glenn. He asked if I was coming to Amber's party. I stared at the screen for a second because Delaney had told me it was just a girls' night. I texted back asking what he meant. He did not answer right away. That was enough to make my chest tighten. I told Landon I would be back in an hour and grabbed my keys. The drive across town felt longer than it should have. When I pulled up, the street was packed with cars. Music was thumping through the walls. It was not a small gathering. It was a full house. I parked a block away and walked up the driveway. The front door was wide open. There was a gold banner over the entrance that said surprise, but the whole place already felt like a secret that had been exposed too late. I stepped inside and scanned the room. People turned to look at me. A few smiled awkwardly. Chris, Amber's husband, was in the kitchen with a bottle opener in his hand, looking confused to see me. I nodded and kept moving. Then I heard Delaney laugh, that laugh. It was coming from the back patio, light and soft and way too familiar. I followed it through the crowd, past the dining room, past the sliding glass door, and stopped cold when I saw her. Delaney was leaning against the patio railing with a wine glass in her hand. Reed was standing too close. His hand was on her waist, not friendly, not casual. His thumb was moving in small circles just above her hip, and she was leaning into him like it was the most natural thing in the world. I stood there for a second, unable to move. Then I opened the sliding door. The sound made them both turn. Delaney went white. Reed stepped back. The glass in her hand tilted and red wine spilled onto the concrete. I looked at her, then at him, then back at her. "This is your girl's night," I said. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Delaney opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Reed raised his hands like he could explain it away. "Dean, listen, this is not, do not finish that sentence," I said. My voice was calm, too calm. That was the scary part. I looked at Delaney and asked, "How long?" She shook her head and said, "Dean, please not here, let's go home." "How long, Delaney?" She did not answer, and then it happened. "You picked our son's godfather," I said quietly. "You let me trust him with my boy, and then you gave him everything that was supposed to be ours." The patio went dead silent. I turned and walked back through the house, past the faces staring at me, past the cake on the table, past Chris, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I did not yell. I did not throw anything. I just walked out the front door and into the cold October air. Behind me, Delaney called my name. I kept walking. I got into my truck and drove for over an hour without a destination. My phone kept buzzing on the seat beside me. Delaney, Glenn, Delaney again. I ignored all of it. My hands were locked around the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles hurt. I ended up in a truck stop parking lot off I-80. The fluorescent lights made everything look sickly and flat. I sat there with the engine idling, replaying the scene over and over. Reed's hand on her waist, her face when she saw me. The way she looked less guilty than inconvenienced, like I had interrupted something she had carefully arranged. Eventually, I checked my phone. 19 missed calls, 12 texts. Delaney's messages were the worst part. "Dean, please come home. We need to talk about this like adults. You are blowing this out of proportion. It was not what it looked like. We are friends." That last one made me stare at the screen for a long time. Friends, I had friends, real friends. Friends do not stand with your wife on a patio with their hand on her waist while hiding from a party. Then came the message that made my stomach turn. If you loved me enough to listen, you would come home instead of running away like a child. I read that line 3 times. She had cheated. She had been caught, and somehow within 2 hours she had already turned it into my fault. I called my younger brother, Ray. He answered on the second ring and did not ask questions when I told him I needed a place to stay. He just said the side door was unlocked and there were clean towels in the hall closet. That is the kind of brother Ray is. He does not make a scene. He just leaves the light on. I got to his place around midnight and sat on the guest bed in my work boots, staring at the ceiling. Sleep did not come. Anger did, but not in a loud way. It came slow, heavy, deep enough to settle into my bones. The next morning I showered, borrowed one of Ray's shirts, and went to work like nothing had happened. I ran the morning briefing, checked the line, signed the safety logs. My guys could tell something was wrong, but nobody asked. That is how things work on a floor like that. You do your job and you let other people keep their dignity. Around noon, Glenn texted me. "Hey, brother, you okay? I heard things got rough last night." I asked him how long he had known. He took 40 minutes to answer. "A couple months, maybe," he wrote. "I saw them at a restaurant in Warren back in August. I was not sure what I was looking at. I did not want to start something if I was wrong." I sat there with the phone in my hand and felt something inside me go cold. A couple months. He had known for months. He had looked me in the eye, eaten at my table, laughed in my kitchen, and said nothing. I did not answer him. I never answered him. That same evening, I drove back to Ray's. Landon had texted asking where I was. I told him I had an early shift and was crashing at Uncle Ray's. He sent back a thumbs-up emoji. 14 years old and no idea his whole world was about to change. I sat on Ray's porch with a cup of coffee that went cold in my hands and made a decision. No more hoping, no more guessing. I was calling a lawyer in the morning. Donald Underwood's office was on the second floor of a brick building downtown, wedged between a tax preparer and a dentist. He listened without interrupting while I told him everything. The party, Reed, Glenn, the messages, the feeling that my whole life had been built on a lie. When I finished, he tapped his pen twice and said we needed to pull financial records immediately. He was right. 3 days later, his forensic accountant, Sheila, laid out the numbers on his desk. Over the past 2.5 years, Delaney had withdrawn just over $91,000 from our joint savings and a home equity line I did not even know existed. The amounts were small enough to avoid attention. 300 here, 450 there. A slow leak. Then came the house. Delaney had transferred the deed into her mother's name. My signature was forged. It was sloppy, but enough to make my stomach drop when I saw it. "That is not just a divorce issue," Donald said. "That is fraud." Then Sheila pulled up Landon's college fund. Last time I had checked, it had $43,000 in it. The balance now was $612. I could not speak for a second. "She drained it," I said finally. "Yes," Sheila said quietly. "Where did it go?" She slid another page across the desk. Rent payments for a 1-bedroom apartment in Akron. Purchases from a men's jewelry store. Plane tickets to Nashville. A whole second life, built piece by piece while I was working overtime and believing I was supporting my family. Donald looked at me and said we were filing immediately and not negotiating. He also warned me that Delaney would fight. He was right. 3 days after the divorce filing, I came back to Ray's apartment after a 10-hour shift and found 2 police officers waiting outside the door. They told me Delaney had filed a complaint claiming I threatened her during a phone call 2 nights earlier. I had not spoken to her since the party, not once. The officers looked uncomfortable, but they still handed me a temporary protective order. I was told to stay away from the house and from Delaney. My son lived in that house. That was the part that hit me hardest. She had not just betrayed me. She had used the legal system to make me look dangerous. She could not beat me with the truth, so she tried to beat me with paperwork. Donald was not surprised. He said it was a classic move. Create a story, make the husband look unstable, gain leverage in custody. I sat on Ray's couch that night with the order in my hand and felt the anger rise again, but this time it was sharper. She was willing to keep my son away from me. She was willing to turn me into a threat in front of the law. That night, Ray sat across from me at the kitchen table and asked what I needed. I told him I needed not to become the man she was describing. He nodded and said, "Then don't." Simple, brutal, true. The hearing came faster than expected. Donald had pulled phone records, cell tower data, and the financial audit together in a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. Delaney's attorney tried to argue that I had intimidated her. Donald laid the records on the judge's desk and let the silence do the work. The judge looked at Delaney and said there was no evidence of contact between us at all. The protective order was dissolved. But the bigger blow came later when I got into Delaney's cloud backup and found the messages. 14 months of them, not 8. 14. Messages, voice notes, hotel photos, restaurant receipts. She had a code name for Reed in her contacts. She had been planning her exit for months. She told her sister she would phase me out gradually. She wrote that she would tell Landon I chose to leave because kids believe what their mothers tell them. That line sat in my chest like a stone. She was not just leaving me. She was planning to erase me. I sent everything to Donald. Then I called Landon. I asked him carefully if Mom had said anything confusing about me lately. He was quiet for a long time before he said she told him I did not want to live with them anymore, that I picked work over my family. I told him that was not true. Then why are you not here, Dad? Because sometimes the truth takes longer to sort out than the lies, I told him. But I am not going anywhere. He was quiet again, and I could hear how much he wanted to believe me. A week later, he called me at 11:15 at night. Dad, can you come get me? His voice was shaking. He told me Reed was sleeping in my bed. Delaney had moved his things into the closet. There were shaving supplies in the bathroom and shoes by the door that were not mine. He said he could not stay there. I told him to pack a bag and wait outside. When I pulled up, he was sitting on the porch steps with his backpack and his basketball shoes tied together over his shoulder. He looked smaller than he should have looked. He got in the truck without saying much. We drove in silence for a few miles before he finally told me Delaney had said I was the one who ruined everything, that I embarrassed her at Amber's party. Then he said something that made my throat tighten. Reed had been coming around since last summer, and Delaney used to send him to his room whenever he showed up. She told him Reed was helping with the taxes. Nobody does taxes at 10 at night, Dad. He was right. The next morning, Donald told me Reed had filed a defamation lawsuit against me, claiming my confrontation and what I had said afterward damaged his reputation and business. I laughed when I heard it, not because it was funny, because it was absurd. The man who slept with my wife and moved into my house was suing me for telling the truth. Donald said he would move to dismiss it, and that the lawsuit would probably help us in court because it showed Reed was more worried about his image than the damage he had caused. That afternoon, I sat with Landon at Ray's kitchen table and helped him with algebra. He had been falling behind. He had stopped turning in assignments. We worked through the problems together, one at a time, and for a little while the room felt normal. Then he looked up and asked if we were going to be okay. I put my hand on the back of his neck and told him yes, and for the first time in months I believed myself. Reed showed up at Ray's apartment one Wednesday evening. No warning, no call, just 3 knocks and his voice through the door asking to settle things like men. I stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind me. My phone was already recording. He said Delaney told him we were done, that she said we had been living separate lives for over a year. I told him he had every reason to know better. He looked pale when I mentioned the financial records, the apartment in Akron, and the Nashville trip. I told him my attorney had everything. Then I told him he had made himself part of the case when he filed his lawsuit. He tried to backpedal, said he would drop it. Too late, I told him. Then I said something that made him go still. Leave my family alone. He left without another word. A day later, Donald told me Delaney's attorney had withdrawn from the case. The evidence was too much. The forged deed, the drained accounts, the false police report, the messages. No one wanted to stand next to that kind of mess. Then Dana Keegan called me, Reed's wife. She had found the court filing online and wanted the truth. I told her everything. The apartment, the Nashville trip. The way Reed had acted like the party was his real life and I was the interruption. She was quiet for a long time, then told me he had said he was at a conference that weekend. I did not know what to say to that. A few days later, Reed dropped the lawsuit. After that, the divorce moved fast. The judge gave me full custody of Landon. Delaney got supervised visitation twice a month at a family center. The house was ordered returned to joint ownership pending sale, and the proceeds were to be split after restitution for the forged transfer. She was also ordered to repay the college fund. Donald told me I was entitled to half the equity in the house. I told him I did not want it. Let her keep it, I said. Let her sit in it alone. I walked out of that courthouse with Landon beside me and nothing else. No house, no savings, no illusions, just my son and a future I had to build from the ground up. Winter settled over Youngstown hard that year. Landon and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the west side. It was small, plain, and ours. No ghosts in the hallway, no lies in the walls. I kept working at the plant. The guys there never asked direct questions. They just showed up for me in the quiet ways that matter. Landon started doing better. His grades came back up. He made the JV basketball team. We got burgers at a diner on Market Street some nights, and he started talking a little more again. Delaney's supervised visits continued, but he came back quieter each time. One night he told me she cried through the whole visit and kept saying she was sorry. He said it did not feel like real sorry. He was right. Reed moved to Columbus after Dana filed for separation. I heard he lost clients. I heard he ended up in a studio apartment and then a motel. I did not celebrate it. I just let it be what it was. Delaney's mother, Gail, called me one afternoon. She said she had not known about the deed transfer and believed Delaney when she said it was temporary. She sounded tired, ashamed. I told her I believed her. Then in late January, Delaney called me herself. She told me Reed had left, that the apartment was gone, that the house was in foreclosure, that her mother would not co-sign another loan. She was staying in a motel off Belmont Avenue. She said she had made a mistake. I told her I was sorry she was hurting, but I had spent 21 years being her safety net. I told her I could not be her backup plan. Then I hung up. That was not easy. Nothing about this was easy. But it was right. By spring, Landon and I had started to find our rhythm again. One Saturday, we drove out to the Mahoning River with coffee, pretzels, and his basketball. We skipped stones and talked about nothing important for a while. Then he asked if I missed her. I told him I missed who I thought she was. I told him the woman I married and the woman who did this did not feel like the same person anymore. He nodded like he understood more than he wanted to. Then he told me she had said she was getting help and wanted to earn his trust back. I told him people say a lot of things when they are losing. He smiled a little. We stayed there for over an hour, just throwing stones and watching the river move. At one point, he threw a rock into the water and said it felt good to let something go. I picked up one of my own and thought about everything I had carried. The betrayal, the humiliation, the legal fight, the nights I could not sleep, the feeling of being erased in my own home. I threw the stone and watched it disappear into the current, and for the first time in a long time, I felt lighter. I want to give you an update because a lot has changed. Landon and I are still in that apartment, and it is still not fancy, but it feels like home now. He is doing well in school, and the counselor Donald set him up with has helped more than I expected. He still has hard days. So do I. Some nights he gets quiet for no clear reason, and I know he is thinking about everything that happened. I do not push. I just stay close. Delaney is still in the picture through supervised visits, but the relationship is fragile at best. There is no neat ending there. I do not know if there ever will be. She has apologized more than once, but apologies do not rebuild trust by themselves. They do not unbreak a child. They do not return the years you spent believing a lie. Reed faded out of our lives the way people do when they no longer have a place to stand. Dana moved forward with her own separation, and I hope she found some peace in the truth because she deserved that much. As for me, I am not the same man I was before that night. I am more careful now, more honest with myself. I pay attention to the quiet things, the pauses, the half-answers, the moments when something feels wrong even if I cannot prove it yet. That is what this taught me. Betrayal does not always arrive with shouting. Sometimes it arrives wearing a familiar face, sitting at your table, laughing with your family. And when it does, you do not just lose trust in other people. You have to rebuild trust in your own instincts too. I think what hurt most was not what they did. It was what it meant. It meant the people I loved had been making choices for months while I was still trying to believe in us. It meant my son had been caught in the middle of adult lies. It meant the life I thought I was protecting had already been taken apart before I ever walked into that party. Grief is strange. It does not always look the way you expect. Sometimes it looks like anger. Sometimes it looks like paperwork. Sometimes it looks like sitting in a truck stop parking lot at 2 in the morning trying not to fall apart. And sometimes it looks like a father teaching his son algebra at a kitchen table and realizing that survival can be quiet. I would do some things differently if I could go back. I would ask more questions sooner. I would trust my instincts when they first started whispering. I would not let being busy become an excuse for being absent. But I would not change the part where I chose my son. That part was never in doubt. So I have to ask you, if you found out the two people closest to you had been lying for months, would you have walked out the way I did, or would you have stayed to hear the explanation? Because I still think about it, and I genuinely do not know if I made the right call. Leave your answer in the comments. I read every single one, and if you want more stories like this, you already know what to do.